Right, let's start. So I'll bet everyone in from the lobby.
Oh, hang on, I'm going in. You're in. I'm in.
Yeah.
From where? I don't mind doing traffic. I don't want to be cut off.
Yeah. Can everyone please mute their microphones, please?
Philip, would you advise people to turn off their...
Certainly.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so just to read, if everyone can turn their microphones off, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. The first thing we do is introduce ourselves. My name is Gina. I'm Councillor Gina Adamu, Haringey Ward, and I chair the licensing subcommittee. I will ask my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Councillor Luke Hawley-Harrison from Crouch End Ward and a member of the committee.
I'm Councillor Sarah Williams from West Green Ward and also a member of the committee.
Thank you. And the officers, please. Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm Dale Barrett, licensing team leader.
My name's Philip Slaughter. I'm the clerk for this committee.
Good evening.
I'm Nisha Bashar.
Michelle Williams.
I'm a licensing officer. Sorry, Michelle. Sorry, I'm Nisha Bashar. I'm the licensing officer.
Hi. And anybody else? Okay. And the applicants, lawyer, Mr. Brown, you're going to say, yeah. We can't hear you.
Oh, beg your pardon, yeah. Winston Brown, solicitor for venue N10. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. And do we have anybody else from, we got licensing authority, obviously, police, ready standards, noise team, no?
Chair, can I just give an update, please? So the police have withdrawn their representation today.
Ah, okay. Okay. Thank you very much. We have a lot of people here with us, which I'm very happy to see. But I want to be asking you to introduce yourselves. May I ask you to nominate one or two speakers for tonight's meeting? And obviously, if you feel something is not covered, or, any of the residents can indicate, and I call them to speak, if that's okay with you. And if you do, how can I put it? If there are many people who want to speak, then we'll have to limit you to 2-3 minutes, because we have a large numbers of residents, which is very nice to see here, but obviously we can't all speak at the same time. I can assure you we all read the written reports here. Now, I'd just like to remind people that to know this meeting is being recorded and will be available for public viewing. I don't think we have any apologies, Phillips. We're all here.
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. And not urgent business, as this is a special meeting of the subcommittee under Part 4, Section B, Paragraph 17 of the Council's Constitution. No other business shall be considered at the meeting. Any declaration of interest? No. Okay. Thank you. In that case, I will quickly the summary of the procedure. The procedure for this meeting has been emailed to all participants by the clerk. For the purposes of any members of the public watching, we will first hear from the licensing officer. After that, the objectors will present their case, and the committee and applicants will have the opportunity to ask questions. Then the applicant will present their application, and the committee and objectors will have the opportunity to ask questions. All parties will then have the opportunity to sum up, and then the meeting will conclude to allow the committee to deliberate and reach a decision. This decision will then be provided in writing within 5 working days of this meeting. Thank you very much, and we start with the licensing officer, Mrs. Park, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask some quick questions, please, before we kick off, please, Chair? Can I just establish if Ms. Suleiman is actually here on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
You are there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Chair, can I just also ask Councillor Ross? I see he's in attendance also. Can he just let us know in what capacity he's attending, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm attending, but I'm afraid I've been informed that I'm not allowed to speak unless someone else asks me to speak.
Okay, that's all. I just wanted to.
I'm the local ward councillor, and I also live very close to the premises.
Right. Okay. Sorry, I just needed to check because I hadn't been given any pre-notification of you speaking. That's why I was checking. Okay.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Sorry, the chair asked if residents that wanted to put forward nominees.
Yes.
Do you want to address that first, Chair, before we start on this, or?
Thank you, but I thought I'd give them time to decide it. If they know who the main speaker is, please, somebody can tell us. Or if not, you can let Philip know when you're ready.
Actually, I know the councillor who's just spoken actually is very eloquent, and I would like him to speak on behalf of the residents.
You're talking about Councillor Ross?
Yes, please.
Is it advisable? I'm asking I'm asking now the officers. Is that okay?
Yes, Chair, that's okay. We just like to be clear as to who's nominating Councillor Ross.
So this is David Holton, a resident. I attended the last meeting 3 years ago, whatever.
Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
I'm sure a number of hands are up, Chair.
Yes, I've just seen them. Laura, I think I've seen your hand first.
I think someone from Pinnacle Close should speak because it's the back door where a lot of the trouble starts, which goes straight out onto into their forecourts.
In that case, it's fine. I have no problem with that. Would you like to speak on that?
I would speak, yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and the other hand has gone. Okay, that's fine.
Sorry, that was Ben Rogoff. Ben, did you have a query?
No, I was just supporting the idea of Councillor Ross speaking on behalf of residents. I'm also a local resident, live in Wellfield Avenue. Thank you.
That's no problem whatsoever. He's happy to do so, and the advice is that he's allowed to. Okay, Delia, when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, the licensing subcommittee have before them this evening an application for a new premises licence for the premises at 272 Muswell Hill, Broadway, London, N10. Apologies, Chair, I've left the wrong details at 1.1. Can I just point out that the application is in fact submitted by the Venue N10 Limited for this application. The applicant is seeking the license for activities of regulated entertainment, live music, recorded music, and the performance of a dance. You'll see there, Chair, the hours being requested, so Monday to Sunday, 12 till 2 a.m. Late night refreshment, which of course will only start after 11 p.m. in the evening. That's 11 p.m. till 2 a.m. Monday to Sunday. And the supply of alcohol, Monday to Sunday, 12 till 2 a.m. Alcohol sales would be for on consumption on the premises only. The hours open to the public, Mr. Suleiman is asking for Monday to Sunday, 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. A copy of the application can be found at Appendix A, which is on page 6 of the application form. Within the pack, the committee has a variety of representations that have been received from the Metropolitan Police, the Licensing Authority, and also the Noise Responsible Authority, as well as Trading Standards. Now, the police have in fact accepted or withdrawn their representation, which you can see on page 39 of the pack. That has been withdrawn today. The applicant solicitor, Mr. Brown, has in fact sent an email as of last week accepting all the conditions put forward by the various responsible authorities, and has also made a counter offer of operating times. I believe it was midnight during the week and Friday and Saturday nights until 2 a.m. is what he has proposed. Chair, in terms of the recommendations, so in considering the representations received, the licensing committee may, as it feels appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives, grant the application as requested, grant the application whilst imposing additional conditions and or altering it in any way, as well as the proposed operating schedule, exclude any of the licensable activities which has been applied for, or reject or the whole or part of the application. Of course, the panel knows that in whatever decision it takes, it must give clear and appropriate reasons in order to show how it's considered the promotion of the licensing objectives. In terms of background, the premises did in the past hold a premises license. It was operated at Socialite Bar under Mr. Brian John. Mr. Brian John remains the leaseholder of the premises. The new applicant, Ms. Sullivan, that should be, we understand is subleasing the premises from Mr. John in order to provide licensable activities at the premises. The previous license was subject to a review brought by the Metropolitan Police due to serious crime and disorder issues emanating from the premises. The license was subsequently revoked by the licensing committee in December 2016. That decision was appealed by Mr. John, but the appeal was then later withdrawn in May 2017. The premises has operated as a venue offering milkshakes for the past 18 months or so. The applicant has also hired out the premises for events, some of which were held under a temporary event notice, and on at least one or so occasions, no permissions were applied for some of the events that took place. The planning authority has informed the licensing authority that the premises has permission to operate until 2 a.m. each day, except Sundays and bank holidays. There has been no further application to planning to allow for a Sunday operation at the venue, even though they've applied for it under this licensing process. So at point 3, we've got the various sections of the licensing policy within there. I won't run through it all because I know the licensing officer will take these up with you. But just to mention a few, in considering license applications where relevant representations are made, the licensing authority will consider the adequacy of measures proposed to deal with the potential for public nuisance and or public disorder, having regard to all the circumstances of the case. Where relevant representations are made, the authority will demand stricter conditions with regard to noise control in areas that have denser residential accommodation. But this will not limit opening hours without regard for the individual merits of an application. The authority will consider each application and work with the parties concerned to ensure that adequate noise control measures are in place. Any action to promote the licensing objectives will be appropriate and proportionate. Also, the licensing authority may not impose conditions unless its discretion has been exercised following a receipt of relevant representations, and it is satisfied as a result of the hearing that it is appropriate to impose conditions to promote one or more of the 4 licensing objectives. Therefore, conditions may not be imposed for the purpose other than promoting the licensing objectives. If I go further, so as you know, Chair, there are other considerations here that come into play. One of which is the Section 17 of the Crime and Disorder Act 1998, which requires the council to have regard to ensuring it's doing all it can to prevent crime and disorder in the area. And as you know, the Human Rights Act comes into effect here also, Chair. Chair, you will see from the many representations received, there is quite a lot of representation in the pack from residents. I think this points to the fact that the area has undergone some change in recent years, and certainly since the socialite bar lost its license, there has been some residential developments in the immediate vicinity to this particular terrace, and that's reflected in the very many representations that you have before you in the pack, Chair. Chair, you also have within the pack the representation from the building control officer. Now, a lot of those things are technical matters that the building control officer would require somebody operating such a premises to have those things in place. Mr. Brown did submit an additional pack last week in which there was a fire safety assessment and other documentation, but we've not had a response back at this time from the building control officer on those particular issues yet. So, Chair, there I will leave it, Chair. Sorry, Chair, just in case you haven't picked it up in the application, the premises itself, Chair, is along a terrace, a row of units, Chair, along a terrace. And in order to access the terrace, you are entering at ground floor and then you go down into the basement, Chair. So if you imagine it, it's your archetype of a nightclub or late night purpose built, designed for that, we would say. Chair, there I'll leave it if you have any questions for me.
Thank you very much. First, I will ask members if they have any questions. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Barrett. Yeah, just a few questions, if you don't mind. So the first was, did the police give a reason for withdrawing their representation? The second is that there was, this is maybe for you to look at, I suppose, there was reference in the pack to the 130 person capacity not necessarily being evidenced. So I was wondering what capacities had been given for the venue previously and under previous owners, and why that was being questioned. In the pack in section 2.3, the wording slightly confused me. So perhaps you could just confirm. It said on the second sentence of section 2.3, there has further application to planning to allow for a Sunday application. I wasn't sure if that was there has been a further application or there should be a further application. So if you can confirm that one. And then final one was as part of the supplementary pack from the applicants, there was a proposed condition that the venue be limited to being a private event establishment. So I'm wondering, from the licensing authority's perspective, from the council's perspective, and perhaps legal, what does that actually mean? Because in my mind, it could be a private event, but someone could still walk up and just enter if they knew people. So is there actually a sort of a rule within the council's policy book in terms of what is considered a private versus a public event? And if not, should we effectively treat that particular condition as null and void? Hopefully you wrote them down, but I can repeat them if you wish.
Okay, no problem. So the first one was around the police representation. So the police representation was really asking for the time to be pulled back, and they also offered some a raft of conditions that they say they would want to have added to the license were it to be granted on page 40. So in effect, Mr. Brown has come back on behalf of his client and offered closing time of midnight during the week and 2 a.m. on a Friday and a Saturday, and has accepted all of the police conditions offered on page 40. So hence the reason the police have now withdrawn their representation on that basis. Okay. The capacity. So in the documentation that Mr. Brown submitted last week, and I think you've got them in the additional docs. So there is a fire safety assessment in that pack. Yeah? And one of the first things, I believe at section 5, it points out what the capacity has been worked out to be. Now, it is a technical issue, and I suppose I raised it initially in the report, and I know the building control officers raised it also, hence the reason why it's now in the responding pack that Mr. Brown has submitted for consideration. So the response, I believe, was that the overall capacity would be 100, staff was something like 5, and the public capacity was something like 70, I believe. But overall, as a mixture, the premises could at any one time have 100 people in there. And on the application form, it says 130, but I didn't think that was the limit it had previously either, Chair. With regard to offering private entertainment venue or not, the Licensing Act deals with licensed activities. So, you know, even if you are hiring out the venue for a particular event, you are still paying. You know, if alcohol is being supplied at the premises and so forth, it's still done under a premises license regardless. So I haven't gathered that that's been the ask or what the applicant was seeking to offer. Maybe they can enlighten us on that this evening if that's the case, if that's the route they want to go down. But in any event, if they're offering regulated entertainment or they're going to be offering licensed activities in general, then they still need a premises license for that ability.
Thank you. I had one question, but it's been answered already. So
sorry, Chair. Just there was section 2.3 as well, Ms. Barrett.
2.3 was my error. That was there has been no further applications to planning.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thanks, Chair. My question was about the whether there'd been any update, and forgive me if I've missed it, regarding the rather damning building control report. I realise we've had a fire strategy now, and we know about occupancy, but I'm not sure about all the other things listed there.
Right. So I did try and chase the building control officer today, but no, we've not had a response back from the building control officer at this time. So I'm taking it that the panel will need to view it that his representation still stands, basically.
Yeah, because there's 27 issues there, aren't there? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And okay, I would take any questions from the applicant or Mr. Brown. Do you have any questions at all at this point?
Just one thing on the building control issue. Obviously, as a matter of fair process and a fair hearing, if there's going to be a point taken about the building control, obviously we do need to know what the response is of the building control to the report itself. My client has taken the trouble to have read his representations in detail. We've gone to the trouble of paying an expert to come in and do a very detailed report on all the points he's raised. We say the report covers all the points raised. A bit disappointed we haven't had the courtesy of a response to at least say it's disputed or accepted. My concern is if this committee is going to then make a decision adverse to the application based on what has just been called a damning report on building control, well, we need to know what exactly building control is still saying. I would have thought, given a hearing of this magnitude, given it has such a importance to the wider community, I'm surprised we haven't had the decency of a response to this report. So my simple point, it may be that officer's on the meeting tonight, I do hope so, but I'm just making that point that we do, if there are still going to be objections taken to it, then we do want to. I just put that out there, I suppose, just to make that point that we've given plenty of time for the building control to come back on a very detailed report. We've taken seriously what he said.
Sorry, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, that's meant to be a question really to me, but you're making a point there.
I understand your point, and I have a question on that myself to you, but not now, later on, Mr. Brown. So if you don't have any question for the
no questions at this time, no, just a comment.
Okay, we move on.
Can I just say one thing? Sorry.
I was going to ask, are there any questions from the residents here with us tonight?
Yeah, so from the risk assessment.
I can't see who's speaking, I'm afraid.
It's the applicant herself.
Okay,
Yeah.
Please introduce yourself.
So the report we received back from them, more or less everything was in place.
You will have a chance later on in your presentation to talk about it. At this point, I just take questions to the report we just heard from the licensing office. You have a chance to come at a later time. Are there any questions from the residents?
Can I make a point, please? I'm a resident of.
Do you have no point? At this point, I will take questions about the report we just heard. If you have any question, please ask.
For the report? No.
Yeah.
Not specifically to the report.
Not specifically to the report.
In that case, you have plenty of time afterwards.
All right. So you'll let me talk afterwards, will you?
Of course, of course.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Can I ask? We don't have building control with us, as I understand it, but we have the licensing officer. Char, would you like to speak on your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Our representation was based on that the premises initially operated as a wine bar, but ended up becoming a nightclub until the license was revoked in 2017. The revocation was due to concerns of the prevention of crime and disorder and public nuisance and the risk to public safety in relation to the management of the premises. Whilst this application is from a new operator, the licensing subcommittee should note that Mr. John continues to be the leaseholder of the venue. The concerns remain relating to the potential for noise nuisance to be generated through the fabric of the building. It should also be noted that the application states the capacity of 130, and there hasn't been any evidence to support this. We do not consider 130 capacity a credible figure for a basement venue. The LSC's attention is drawn to the document submitted by Mr. Brown that includes the fire safety assessment. And this document states that the public capacity is 70 for members of the public or 100 maximum as a combined figure for the staff and public on site at any one time. The venue has been closed for some time, and when it did start to operate again, it did so as an ice cream or milkshake type parlour. The premises did, however, have some booked events which they permitted without having a temporary event notice in place. The council became aware of these events from resident complaints, and flyers of advertising the events were sent through to us. In total, there have been 3 noise complaints lodged on 15th of December 2019, 27th of June 2021, and 31st of July 2021. However, no visits were undertaken by officers. The new management received warnings about offering licensable activity without a license initially in late 2019. Since then, 5 temporary events notices were applied for, the first being 9th of November at 7:30 till 2:30 a.m., 7th of December 2019 from 7:30 p.m. till 2:30 a.m., 14th of December 7 p.m. till 3 a.m., 31st of January 2020, 7 p.m. till 3 a.m. This one was refused. The 1st of February 2020, from 7 p.m. till 2 a.m. This was issued. The one temporary event notice which was refused by the police. The police objected to the event, which was for a birthday party for an 18-year-old. The birthday girl had advertised her party on social media, and the police were concerned of numbers of people attending. The event had attracted unwanted youths to attend, resulting in crime and disorder, and when refused entry or after being allowed entry, this was a concern for the police. The location is serviced by one night bus, and there was concern potentially that intoxicated young people leaving at 3 a.m. and trying to make their way home would cause a noise nuisance to local residents. The most recent complaints from residents was in relation to a series of events that were held at their venue following the various stages of lockdown in June 2021. Residents complained of ongoing operation of the venue as a late night music or event venue. Pictures were taken from the venue's website. This is also contained in our representation. They show that what could be described as a DJ-led event taking place at the premises at a time when there was no temporary event notice in place. The area has gone through some major changes since the nightclub ceased trading, and there is now a whole new residential properties at the rear of the venue. Therefore, noise nuisance is considerably higher. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. In fact, I Googled it today. I know the area well, but I Googled it. I was trying to see if there are buildings behind. Could you tell me how many residents or how many houses are at the back, at the rear of the building?
I'm sorry, Chair, I don't have a figure for you.
Yeah,
Delia, do you?
because I know it used to be a pub there, and then now it's all residential, but I wasn't sure how much more housing was at the rear of the building. Okay, maybe the residents will address it.
Chair,
yeah.
it's Councillor Ross. I can answer that.
Okay, when I call you, you can answer that. Thank
Okay.
you. Can I ask members of the committee, I think, first of all, if you have any questions to the licensing officer. No, I think it was very clear. Thank you very much indeed. Are there any questions from the residents or Councillor Ross for that matter, as you represent the residents, you are the spokesperson? Are there any questions?
I have no questions at this time, Chair.
Okay, in that case,
Chair, the applicant, Mr. Brown, if he has any questions.
Well, yes, if she indicates, yes. Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. You're a bit late. Okay, do you have any questions? I'm not sure how to pronounce your surname. I don't want to make a mistake. Okay.
Sorry, you're talking to me, Chair?
I've seen a name here. Ben, is it Ben?
Yeah, Ben. I'm sorry. Yeah, Ben Rogoff.
Sorry, I can't see all of you, you see, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, understood. No problem.
Okay.
I still struggle with my surname sometimes. Could I just ask the licensing officer to clarify what that date in December was for the unlicensed event that was referenced earlier, please?
Bear with me one moment. I'll go back to my notes.
Thank you.
Sorry, do you mean the one that was refused by the police?
I have photographic evidence of an event on the 5th of December, and I just wanted to clarify that was one of the events that you've referenced.
Yes, there was no temporary event notice in place on the 5th of December. It was unlicensed. Unlicensed,
people queuing outside, no social distancing during just as we came out of lockdown. Okay, just wanted to make sure that was the case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions from anybody?
I do have some questions for the applicant, if I may.
Yes, I was going to come to you. Yes.
Yes, indeed. So I'll speak to the licence officer first of all. Let's get the context of what's happening these venues first of all. So it's right to say, isn't it, if we were to stand outside the venue, opposite the venue is another establishment called the Mossy Wells, yeah?
Yes.
Are you familiar with it? Yeah?
Yes.
And when I look on their website, I see that they also close at 2 a.m. Thursdays, I think Thursdays and Fridays, I believe. Look on my notes. So they have a late opening, do they not? Is that right?
I'm just going to check for you one moment.
Is that relevant? Because
it is relevant. It's relevant to the point that I'm going to be making later on, because it if the licensing officer accepts some of the points about the context in which this venue is operating, then I say it is very relevant. You're going to hear a lot of evidence, allegations around complaints emanating about noise nuisance, breaches of temporary event notices, etc. about these premises. We need to be clear that there are other premises, including one about 2 doors away from these premises. So it needs to be very clear what the evidence is that the applicants are the ones who are the culprits to these various allegations.
Okay.
We can't just make these allegations that stand as it were in a vacuum without understanding the context. That's what I'm trying to establish, because it will help us, I think, understand the arguments as we go through the evening.
Okay, I'll ask to respond. Yeah.
I can confirm that the Mossy Well opening hours Monday to Wednesday are 7 a.m. till 1 a.m. Thursday to Sunday 7 a.m. till 1:30 a.m.
Yeah, and 2 doors away you've got the Broadway. What are the hours there for the Broadway?
Sorry, just before we move on, I'm a resident. That's not consistent with what is on their website, which is midnight closing apart from Friday, Saturday, and 1 a.m., which I think is more consistent with what you experienced. I don't think Mossy Well is a late night venue.
Okay, I think we'll leave it at that. I think you can make your points later, Mr. Brown, if you feel this is relevant. But
all right, let me ask this question, if I may, and I appreciate you running this this particular meeting. The licensing as a responsible authority have not only set out these objections, your representations, but I note, I think within the pack you've put down a number of conditions or proposed alternative conditions here. Can I confirm what is the licensing responsible authority's position tonight? Are you saying that the possible page 37 to 38 of the pack, you've identified a number of what would be acceptable or you would suggest would be appropriate? Are you saying that these are conditions that you could live with, or what? Why are they here if you're saying otherwise? What's your position?
Sorry, Bill.
I think I'd like to say on this that this is recommendations. It's down to the committee to, at the end of our meeting, it's down to the committee to look at all the reports we have in front of us, and it's down to the committee to agree or not agree with the recommendations that come from different, different offices and different people. So those are simply recommendations. It's down to the committee to decide whatever we need to say yes or no. It depends on the discussions and decisions we make later. I think it's only fair I say that, because at this point, officers doing their job, they put the recommendations together. It's down to members of the council what we think is necessary to accept or not.
I hear that, Chair. The point I was trying to make here, when I deal with I do a number of these all the time, and that there's a difference between a responsible authority coming before you and saying there are no conditions, there's no scenario in which we could ever envisage a particular applicant having a premises license. We just don't think they're ever going to be able to comply with the Licensing Act objectives, versus a situation in which we've got concerns. However, if you do grant it, then these are the things we think should be in place. It is a second of those which you have before you. So I just want to make it clear that as I read the licensing responsible authority's position, they are not saying tonight, there is no way in which the venue intent should ever be granted a license. They've raised concerns, but they've also said at the same time there are a raft of conditions we think should be in place if you grant the license. Otherwise, there's no sense in these conditions. So that's simply the point I just want to make. You don't have a responsible authority here that is saying don't have anything to do with venue intent. That is not what they've said.
Is this a question?
It's a point I'm making as to the relevance of why I just said that. Yeah.
Thank you. We hear you, and thank you very much. Do you have any more questions?
No, none for me at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I don't think anybody else has any more questions. I can't see any hands up. Okay, I think now we move on. The police withdraw as trade standards are not here. So I think we come to the residents. Can I ask Councillor Ross, as you're the spokesperson, to present their views?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, as I said earlier, I'm the local councillor, Fortis Green councillor, and I live about 300 yards from the premises. It was mentioned earlier on that the previous licence was revoked, getting on for 5 years ago, because of the huge problems in the area caused by patrons of the previous licensed premises, including fights outside. There was an incident where someone was shot, which I was sitting in my garden and I heard the shots. Actually, let me answer one question that you asked that was asked earlier on. Pinnacle Close has 24 properties, and it's in, as you rightly said, it was in a field, or not a field, a car park, built in a car park behind these premises. It has 24 premises, 24 flats, and 6 of those are townhouses, very close, within 50 metres of the back entrance of this premises. Mention was made also of the police. I was at the police panel, the Fortis Green police panel on Thursday, and the 2 new local policemen, very aware of the previous problems from this premises, and said they would ask the licensing officer to attend tonight. So I was quite surprised, sorry, not the licensing officer, the police licensing officer. So I was quite surprised to hear that the police view has changed. However, be that as it may. The applicant is asking for a 2 a.m. finish. And Muswell Hill does not have a nighttime economy. It's a residential area. Most of the shops in the extreme local area have 2 or 3 floors of flats above them, and of course any noise that spills out into the area, people in those flats are disturbed. And this late night license that they're asking for doesn't attract Muswell Hill residents. If you speak to most people who live in Muswell Hill, very few of them go to these the 2 nightclubs that are right on the top of the hill. That's this one when it was a nightclub, and the one next to it. It attracts people from way outside the area, and frankly, it's not, late night licenses are not suitable for right in the centre of Muswell Hill. There are lots of new houses in the area. I mentioned Pinnacle Close. There are flats directly opposite in 77 Muswell Hill, and there are flats above this premises and to the rear of this premises as well. There's been lots of problems of patrons being attracted to the area, and that attracts other people to the area. There's lots of drug taking now in Springfield Avenue, people selling drugs from cars. There's big problems of drug selling going on now in the Parkland Walk, and in roads very close by. There are people who, when they leave these late night premises, come and park in their cars, or their cars are parked there, leave the doors open, have the music blaring loud. So it's not just the license of this premises, it's the peripheral problems that is attracted to the area. I was intrigued actually, on page 9 of the application, at the top in that box, it says the premises will be used for hire for private events such as children's parties, engagement parties, christenings and baby showers and corporate events. That is not what this premises will be used for. This premises will be used for late night young people coming from outside the area, because it's one of the only, or it will be if a 2 a.m. license is granted, it will be one of the very few premises with a late license in the area. Mention was made of the Mossy Well. It's an entirely different type of premises. It's a Wetherspoons pub, and I know it has a reasonably late license, but Wetherspoons is a national company, publican company, and their premises in general are well run, and don't attract the sorts of patrons that we think, the residents think, and certainly Muswell Hill Residents Association, who talk to all their members. It's not the sort of premises or not the sort of license that should be granted in this particular part of Muswell Hill. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I promise Laura that I will call her to speak. Do you want to add anything to what Councillor Ross just said?
I want to absolutely agree with every word Councillor Ross says, and I live at number 5 Duke's Avenue, just across the road. And I've read the submissions, and I read the applicant's submission, and it says in there under 310, the conditions cannot seek to manage, that the staff cannot seek to manage the behaviour of customers once they are beyond direct management of the licence holder and staff. That means once they're out on the street, all hell breaks loose. I note as well with concern that Mr. John, as was said at the beginning of the meeting, is the leaseholder still, and therefore he still has control. And I read the fire report, which I thought was quite interesting, about extension leads, dangerous extension leads, no fire extinguishers in the cooking area, plastic wall coverings and low ceiling height, and no documentary evidence that that is fireproofed. The upper floors, as was said by Councillor Ross, are residential and further inspection is required. That's what it says in the fire report. The fire alarm system needs a full service, and the control panel is without power. Hardly inspires confidence. No fire training for staff. And since this meeting has started, I absolutely agree about the food is only served from 11 o'clock onwards. It just belies, it is beyond belief that this was serving milkshakes and children's pies. I didn't see any evidence of such activities up till now, milkshakes and parties. And I object to the yummy mummies thing, because there's lots more people in Muswell Hill than yummy mummies. And as Councillor Ross says, nobody goes to places like that. Midnight during the week, no. And 2 o'clock. The non-authorised events are still taking place, so they are not abiding by what is being said. So it doesn't, again, inspire confidence going forward. And the back door, again, as Councillor Ross says, now goes on to a residential area with 24 people, and that is where a lot of it, and out the front. And as I said in my previous submission, it was quieter in the West End than Muswell Hill. It is not safe to go out when that club is in operation, and I just despair really about if this licence is granted. So I object strongly.
Chair, if I may add one more thing, if I may.
Yes.
I'm a member of the licensing committee on the council. I couldn't attend this obviously because I'm the local councillor, but the numbers of licensing, and there's been quite a few over the last few months. I know this is anecdotal, but most of them have 20, 30, 40 pages. The depth of feeling in Muswell Hill, it's 100 pages, most of which are objections from residents. So I know it's anecdotal, but that's the strength of feeling in the area.
Yeah. Thank you. I have 2 more people that I want to speak on from the residents. One is called Barbara Hall, the first one, and then is it Kali Singh, yeah? And I'll take these 2 residents and then we open to the questions. Barbara first.
Yes, I made application.
I can't see you, but you can speak. We hear you.
Yes, okay. Yeah, we live in the flats opposite, 77 Muswell Hill. There are 41 flats, new flats in the building. There are 8 flats above, so that they're all occupied.
Family.
And their family, a lot of them with small children. There are elderly people. There are sick people within the building. We don't want our nights disturbed by people coming out at 2 a.m. in the morning. What happens is they come down the side road here and they start dealing in drugs. They have their car doors open. They have music blaring. They're shouting. There are fights. Jocelyn, my neighbour here, lives in flat 36. That's exactly opposite the buildings. She has seen people urinating in the street. They park their cars in front of, because it's quite a wide pavement, they park their cars on the pavement, so they're not in the bus lane.
They come out to smoke.
They come out to smoke at various times.
50 people out there smoking and fighting, and then they go back in. I live opposite, and I know exactly what happened in that club when it was original. And what happens is they come along, they go into the club, and then they come out to smoke. And they're smoking, and they bring their drinks outside. They urinate on the walls, they're sick, they're drunk, they're noisy. And my son will not let his daughters come to my flat to visit me in an evening because of that club. And the people in our flats are frightened. Our concierge was made to feel very frightened when that club was open, because when he asked the people to keep quiet, they physically went and intimidated him. This is not a place, this is a residential area. We already have one club there. They have bouncers outside and they control it very well. You can't talk about the Mocky Well, Wetherspoons. They have bouncers out there. They have an outside terrace where people can go and smoke. It's not on the street, and this is absolutely ridiculous. We pay our taxes to be in a place where we thought was a safe place, but with this club open, it was never a safe place.
Okay.
It's disastrous. And the people that come round, and you see them, they're coming up on their Vespers, selling them drugs.
Thank you, Barbara. I think you made your points very clear. Can I ask
one more point? Sorry, just to say that when they were open, both the Pinnacle and our developer, the landlord, supplied us with a security detail. We had every weekend, we had to have security guards on the road. So, you know, this stopped obviously when the clubs were closed, but we'll have to restart. And I said in my submission that I think if we have to pay for this, then it's a council cost.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Mr. Singh, do you want to add? Can I ask if you have anything new to say? Not repeating. Yeah.
I do. I just have some questions based on the recent submission made by the applicant dated 16th of September.
The applicant hasn't presented the application yet. You can ask questions once they do that.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I'll wait until then.
Thank you. Now I will take questions from members first to the residents who spoke. Please indicate if you have any questions.
Excuse me, Councillor Adam. I just wanted to. I omitted to mention the children's home and the protection of children from harm. That's very important as well. Sorry, I did omit to say that. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I can assure you, we read all the papers, all the reports, all the letters, so we're well informed. Are there any questions from members first? I don't think there are. Councillor Harrison.
Do you have? Yeah, I just wanted. I think it was maybe Councillor Ross said that in addition to the dates presented in the licensing representation, the venue had continued to open since that point. Is that what residents are saying, that there have been further instances beyond the dates that have been listed? I think that was what was being said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Chair, it wasn't me, Councillor. It wasn't me.
Okay.
No, but it's true. It's true.
Okay. Thank you. Can I ask Mr. Brown? Do you have any questions to the Any questions for the residents?
No, I don't. No.
Okay, if there is no questions, and then we'll move on. Then Mr. Brown, please present the applications.
Sorry, Chair, before you move on, there are hands still up. Mr. Rojas has his hand up, as does Magdalena.
They must have just came up because I looked a minute ago, it wasn't there. Okay.
Sorry, it's me again.
Okay.
Can I just ask, does the committee take in, can I just ask from a procedural
Did you say
perspective?
your name, Ben? Okay.
Ben Rose, yeah. Can I just ask, does the committee from a procedural perspective take into account in this application the applicant's behaviour holding unauthorised activities at the club? Like, does that have a bearing here? Because is it trustworthy? Can I just understand the process? If someone is applying for an application to sell, given the history, given the fact that this is honestly this was the source of all the trouble that Muswell Hill has ever faced, frankly, this venue, does the committee take into account the behaviour of the applicant in the intervening years, and will they take that into account as to their whether or not they're suitable to be holding events in the future? Thank you.
This is the kind of discussion we will have after our meeting, and before, obviously we discuss everything, including in the legislation of the licensing law and everything, and then we come to our decision.
Okay.
I think there is another hand up. Is it Magdalena? I don't know. Oh, I can't see who it is.
Hi, yes, Magdalena from here. Just a quick question. As the fire safety says that the actual venue it's not suitable for as such a club, etc. How would actually applicant planning to make the place safe in case of emergency? Like, how are you planning to allow 130 people roughly to leave the premises safely if there is no windows at the premises?
I don't know.
And at the back of the building, actually, you do have a number of obstructions, like, for example, cars parked or the bins itself that they belong to other businesses around.
Could I ask you to ask the question after Mr. Brown presents the application?
Of course, no problem.
Okay, so all right. If there is nothing else, before I move on, please indicate, because once I move on, I won't take any more questions to Mr. Brown. Is that Rich and Pat Love? Is that am I right? Do you have any questions? Do you want to say anything? I can't hear you.
Rich, you're on mute.
I can see your hand up moving, but I can't.
Sorry, Chair, the only hand is up is Magdalena's. I think she just asked
No, there is a hand on this side. It says Rich and Pat Love guest, and he was he's going like that. No, okay. I think we have to move on. Mr. Brown.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Chair. Okay, and no doubt there'll be various questions and comments on these. I'll take note of the fact that this is obviously a very, let's say, a controversial application because of the history. We don't duck that history. Let's deal with it head on. So I've submitted to this committee, and it's circulated, published on the website, these submissions on behalf of the applicant on this. So just going through them just briefly, as it were. So the applicant has been our venue N10. The director who's the proposed DPS is Sergil Suleiman, who's also on this particular meeting tonight. The original application was for the various forms of regulated activity, live music, recorded music, dance, late night refreshment, alcohol, was going to be 7 days a week, 12 p.m. until 2 a.m. That's been modified following consultation to closing from 12 till midnight, Sunday to Thursday, and Fridays to Saturdays, 12 until 2 a.m. So that was in response to comments made by the police. Now, dealing with there are objections, of course, from the various authorities, a number of responsible authorities here that have been set out. We can disregard the police insofar as the police have now, they've raised their concerns and they have withdrawn their objection. It's worth dwelling on the police for a moment because, of course, it was the police that brought the review back in 2016. So we do make the point that if the responsible authority that is responsible to maintain law and order, one in the society in general and two in Muswell Hill, are satisfied enough to withdraw their objections, I do not in any way seek to belittle or undermine or take or doubt what the real experiences of residents are. But to the degree that a responsible authority with the remit of law and order, then that is a very weighty consideration in my submission, that you should take account of the fact that the police have been content not to be here tonight and to withdraw their representations, from which I don't believe it's wrong for me to say the police do not hold the view that the venue N10 would pose a risk to law and order, or a breach of, or let's say undermine the prevention of crime and disorder, which is one of the objectives that this committee is required to enforce, as it were. I also just want to deal very briefly. This is more of a technical point, and your legal advisor will no doubt address this point. But the hearing regulations, I think 2005, which gives this committee the power to adopt such procedure as it thinks fit. I note that it does have provision under one of the regulations to adjourn to a specific date if there's a good reason for it, and in particular, if there's a party who doesn't attend, I think it's Regulation 20, then this committee has a power to adjourn to another date if it considers it in the interest of justice to do so. I'm not making that application myself. I'm simply raising my concern here that you've got a raft of objections from building control. To that, the applicant has bothered to provide a detailed report responding to it. If it is going to be said that this committee can make a decision, because you're entitled under the regulations to have regard to representations from an individual who isn't here. So I accept that point, but my problem is that we don't actually know whether building control are satisfied with the report. We don't know if they're happy with it. We don't know if they're still running with their objections or not. So there's a bit of a gap here, and that is, from a procedural point of view, that cannot be right. That cannot be right. Whatever you think about the venue N10, it can't be right that they've actually gone to the trouble to provide a detailed response, and building control haven't even bothered to turn up tonight to say whether they agree or not. So I simply, and can I throw that one, or that tennis ball, as it were, into the court of your legal officer to think about how you respond. How can this committee lawfully and fairly proportionately address that issue? Because building control do make a lot of objections, raise a lot of issues, and my client has gone to the trouble of providing a detailed report. So and I leave that there. I said enough on that point. The other points I'd make with the responsible authorities is that, building control aside, all the others have come out with proposals which give a vision, as it were, as to how the venue N10 could work. All these conditions have been accepted. Leave building control aside for a moment, but as far as the other trading standards, for example, licensing, all these responsible authorities have set out conditions as to how the venue N10 could operate, and they've been accepted. So we say, to the degree that responsible authorities play any part in your consideration as a committee, we'd say we're on all fours. We've reached agreement with them in my submission. Now, if I can deal with head on, then let's come to the heart of this, which is really the objections raised by various residents and so forth. And I set out in the objections, so in my submissions, I should say, the history of this. Now, of course, we know the venue was previously the Socialite Bar. And of course, there was an application for review of the premises license back in 2016. I took the trouble to include with the documentation the review application back in, I think it was a PC Greaves at the time of the Metropolitan Police, and he sets out a whole history of events. It was without doubt a sorry episode, and I'm not surprised perhaps by the strength of feeling that is here tonight and before even tonight. And of course, there were stabbings, there was a shooting and so forth. So in one sense, we're not surprised that there was an application for review, and perhaps not even surprised that the that that establishment lost its license. But I do want to say this here. This committee tonight is not dealing with the socialite bar. You are dealing with an application by the venue N10 by a different entity, a different individual. Yes, Mr. John is the leaseholder. However, Ms. Sullivan is the person who's on the call tonight on this meeting who will be running these premises. I'll come to some of the complaints which have been made about the running of the premises hitherto in due course. But I just want to make this point. You're not dealing with the socialite bar tonight. You are dealing with venue N10. And my applicant, the clients are entitled, my clients are entitled to have their application viewed, addressed on their merits, not judged on the history. Otherwise, what we'd be saying is there can never be a licensed premises at this particular address ever again. But the law doesn't operate on that basis. Otherwise, we are saying the premises are somehow tainted. That would be somewhat bizarre. What I would say also is this, that the business, you've got the business plan which is before you. What's proposed here is an entirely different model. Now, I took the trouble to actually read what went wrong with the socialite bar. And obviously the residents were living in the, let's accept for a moment that it was an unacceptable reality that they had. When I read the description of how the socialite bar operated, it clearly was a place that, let's characterize the problem for IC. It attracted people from outside the area, typically young men from outside the area. It had a situation where people, members of the public, could enter the premises after about half 12 on a given day, and it was effectively almost out of control. Effectively, it was effectively a bar under the guise of a wine bar. It became a nightclub, as was said. We know that the premises now around the areas become over highly residential premises. We know there are families and children and so forth. So into that context, on what basis can we then say, honestly and lawfully, that these premises, venue N10, could lawfully operate here without becoming the problem that the socialite bar was in the past? Well, we say we draw attention to how this business will operate. It will not be a drop-in place where people can come within those licensing hours, members of the public. It will be a private event only establishment. Specifically, how it will operate is on the basis that individuals book a venue, a party, a bar mitzvah or something of that order, a corporate event, and let's walk you through. So that individual will be risk assessed. Their full details will be taken, the name, the address, and so forth. And then the only people that would be allowed in that event will be people associated, invited to that particular event. To the point raised by one of the councillors, well, how do we distinguish between invitees versus, for example, members of the public? Then, of course, there are conditions. There are conditions that individuals that this committee could propose and stroke, or we could invite the applicant to adopt their business model in such a way that only members, invitees of that particular individual are admitted into the premises. In a previous life, I used to work as a legal advisor to licensing committees, and we were quite used to drawing up quite, not necessarily novel, but certainly effective conditions that would require the operator to operate the premises in such a way that it satisfied the concerns of the committee or subcommittee. And I could envisage a condition here along the lines of only certain people of a certain description should be admitted to the premises, and you'd be looking some evidence that this person is an actual invitee of the person who's hiring out the particular event itself. Let me just deal with also a couple of points here, which is worth noting. One is about the age of the people admitted, and secondly about the capacity point. About the age, the business plan makes clear that the applicants are not going to be holding parties for 18-year-old or 21st birthday, 18 or 21 birthday parties. That's important because that group is associated, rightly or wrongly, with the highest incidence of crime and disorder. So you're not dealing with a venue that will be hosting young people or teenagers, perhaps in their most exuberant phase of life. Now, earlier on, one of the events that was cited here was an event which gave rise to problems, and it was said that was an 18th birthday party. Well, by removing that, making that clear, and that could of course also be a condition of the licensing subcommittee. You have broad discretion to do so. Then that problem goes away in my submission. The other point about capacity, my clients are happy to abide by, of course, the capacity which has been stated. You've heard 70 members of the public and 100 with staff and members of the public together. So the 100 is the stated capacity. I'll take this opportunity just to address the fire risk assessment point. The whole purpose of a fire risk assessment and the whole purpose of tabling it in this meeting is to set out, these are the issues that we identify are required, and these are the actions that an independent expert has said need to be taken. Capital Fire have not said this venue is a dead loss, it could never and should never ever be opened again. It's saying these are the things that need to be done to make this place operate safely and lawfully. And the applicant will simply say, fine, we will address them. Now, how licensing committees up and down the country deal with these type of reports is simply to make as a condition that the license will only be granted upon compliance with, for example, a given report to the satisfaction of the licensing department or someone else that you want to specify. So whatever question marks remain in the report is not the end of the discussion. It simply creates another condition that you can simply that you could adopt in your decision. So I just want to put that in context. So questions within the fire risk assessment isn't the end of the discussion. It's another condition that you could simply adopt in your decision. So I do want to just say this. I do believe that if I can come to the heart of this, which is perhaps the nightmare that a number of residents experienced, what they would say during the era of the socialite bar. We've had descriptions about loud music, women feeling unsafe to walk past the venue at night, screaming and shouting, etc., etc., etc. Let's assume that was a socialite bar. This is not, in my submission, the venue N10 even as of today. I would not be the experience of residents going forward. Of course, now in terms of how it's been operating, I do want to bring this. This is the point I was trying to make earlier on. When people talk about complaints, let's think about the logic of the sequence of a complaint. When someone makes a complaint about noise from a particular venue, we'll work on the assumption, because this is all about the venue N10, that all the complaints relate to patrons from that particular establishment. However, the venue N10, 2 doors along, you got the Broadway, opposite you got the Mossy Wells. Now, my understanding is that, unless I'm told otherwise, that patrons coming in and out of those premises, there have been occasions where there have been complaints, and patrons have been boisterous in those occasions anyway. It's a bit rich to try and portray these organisations as if they are holier than thou, and all the problems are to do with venue N10. Doesn't really make sense. I don't think that's a genuine view. What I would suggest is it's quite possible that some of the noise complaints you're hearing are really from patrons from other establishments, not necessarily venue N10. Nevertheless, let's assume for a minute that the applicant, Ms. Sullivan and others, may have not been perfect in how they operate. We're now talking, the requirement for this committee is not to have a flawless application, but rather to make a decision that I say is proportionate. What is a proportionate decision here? And I submit that, number one, this licensing committee can safely and comfortably grant the premises license to venue N10. And there are a raft of conditions, some of them proposed by your own responsible authorities, some proposed by the applicant themselves, that would give this committee and the wider residents comfort and security that this premises will be run safely and lawfully. And especially, and I do draw a particular attention to the business model that will be said there. Now, in terms of my final point here, just in terms of the thinking about the type of conditions here from a thematic point of view, you've got drug dealing. It suggested drugs were associated or have been associated with the premises. Once again, you can make a condition that there'll be a zero tolerance policy towards illegal drugs. CCTV, once again, that's both in the application. The police have also made detailed proposals as to those, and we've accepted all the police conditions and so forth. SIA security, once again, that's been proposed. The applicant is happy to agree to those as well. I heard somebody refer to Wetherspoons, that they have bouncers outside the door. Once again, remember, all these other establishments, which everyone doesn't seem to have a problem with, they are all working under the same legal framework, the Licensing Act 2003, and they would all then have to comply with the conditions on their license. So if an issue is about security, then this applicant is happy to agree to have security staff on doors. Now, I also mentioned at the same point, they have also proposed within the further conditions a dispersal policy. Now, one of the issues that occurred in the Socialite bar, and it's been repeated more tonight, is about this issue about people congregating outside the premises and making the residents' lives hell and so forth. With a dispersal policy, you have staff and or security staff who are responsible to move people along. People cannot just congregate outside and cause nuisance. The license holder is in breach of their license unless they take active steps to move people along. So an effective dispersal policy would, in my submission, deal with that particular problem. Let me just say this, just to be clear, and having dealt with many of these applications, there is no perfect licensing entity in the country, because no licensing body can ever control what people do in or outside their premises. These are free will individuals. However, what the license holder can do is take such measures as it can to mitigate, to control, and to make less likely this type of antisocial behavior. And what I believe, what I would invite this committee to consider, that a raft of very robust conditions have been put in place to address this particular issue. And just coming, I'll conclude very quickly. I know there'll be a number of questions. On the noise issue, I've been to the premises myself, I've seen it, and also it will be known in the basement, there is a fire door which opens out, and I understand opens onto the street effectively with the steps leading up to the ground floor. My understanding is that if that is ever opened, then noise escapes. So my understanding is, and the occasions when there was complaints of noise nuisance, the door was opened by a patron, which should not have happened. Once again, we say, well, we make it a condition that the door should not be opened, and also make it a condition that the door should be alarmed. So there are conditions. So all a licensing subcommittee can do, you can't predict the future. You can't say this will never happen again. All you can do is use what tools the law gives you, as you know, and the law gives us the opportunity to give conditions on the license. And once they are followed, then the committee can say, we are confident that this will promote the licensing objectives. So against that context, I would say that one of the conditions about noise is, of course, about keeping the door closed, having it alarmed, and also the raft of conditions proposed by the ASB noise team. They've been agreed. They are agreed. They are agreed, including a noise management plan. And you note that the ASB team have also said that until the plan has been implemented, the applicant would only be allowed to play background level noise. So therefore, as far as noise is concerned, once we adhere to these conditions, there would be no noise other than background noise within the premises until the noise management plan has been agreed and implemented. So I do say there's some very robust conditions here which would address the issues about noise. I've addressed the crowd congregation point. We dealt with the crime and disorder point, the nuisance, and so forth. I haven't really seen any particular objections or allegations about children from protecting children from harm. Once again, it is suggested that children would be accompanied with an adult if they enter after a certain time. And I must say, I haven't seen any suggestion that there's an issue about children here, but obviously we're happy to hear questions on that. And the members will see also some further conditions we put on page 5 of our submissions, in which we say go further. I'll pause here and just say this: my final comment at this point is, of course, the hearing regulations anticipate that this hearing tonight is a discussion. So there's a two-way dialogue here. And yes, we're going to hear objections. We're going to hear people say, oh, this can't work. We don't believe you on this. We don't believe you on that, whatever it is. But it's a discussion. And that means to say, let's hear what the views are, but also let's come out with some solutions here. If people have any concerns, then we're very open to discuss them. So that's all I would say at this stage, Chair. No doubt, obviously, I'm sure there'll be questions from myself and my client.
Thank you. First, I will take questions from the members of the committee and afterwards from residents. Can I ask, when the report from the building control, it was read by the applicant, can I ask why they haven't tried to work with building control and put things, the areas of concern, to put them right, instead of having another to have another private or independent report, as you call it? Can I ask you that?
Yes.
You can respond, or whatever the applicant themselves can respond to that.
Well, I think I can respond on this basis. Firstly, I only myself saw the representation of building control, I think sometime last week. So there wasn't much time for us to properly engage with building control, number one. Number two, they're not exactly the easiest responsible authority to engage with. They're not even here tonight, from what I understand. But the point is this, that the building control representations were a list, almost a shopping list of what's wrong with the premises. I did not see any invitation in their objections to the applicant to come and talk to us. We'll help you work it out. It is my invariable experience when we get objections from responsible authorities, be it licensing, be it planning, be it building control, they want to raise the issue, but they don't necessarily want to be a part of the solution. And I don't know that critical, because they would say that's not necessarily their role. Their role is to say what is wrong here and what are you going to do about it. So my client simply said, okay, we hear what you say, we thank you for your concerns. So on the basis that these concerns have been raised, my applicants have done, not in any way being disrespectful to building control, but they've gone to the trouble again, independent expert, to say, okay, here's what they're saying, please help us, how can we address it? So that's the idea. So we're happy to engage with building control, but we genuinely thought that was the best way to deal with it.
Could you also tell me if I'm wrong, but am I right to understand they also went to a private firm for the fire inspection?
I believe that's right. My only instructions are that in the light of the representations on building control, that they instructed Capital Fire Safety. We were obviously concerned. I immediately noted this. So yes, answer to that question, yes. It's also drawing on my own experience before various other subcommittees, is that the committee will often look to see, okay, it's not uncommon for an applicant to get their own expert to come forward with things and to say, how do they respond to the concerns that have been raised? But I need to say this, the applicant is very happy to work with building control. If building control want to engage with them, we're happy to work with them. But obviously, you know, we need more than just an email, a shopping list of what's wrong, and silence when we then try and engage with them. That doesn't help anybody.
Okay, I think I'll leave it there. It's a lot of hands up. First, Mrs. Barrett, do you want to come in on anything before I take questions from members?
Yes, Chair, can I just clarify can I just clarify, Chair, the matters surrounding the building control? So building control have looked at this application through the lens of their health and safety and their technical abilities on places of entertainment, basically. And what they have noted from the application is what Mr. Brown is referring to as the shopping list here. That then really is what they are alerting the applicant to of the basic standards. Obviously, they're put forward an application where they want to be able to have entertainment and so forth within a building. There are the fire safety requirements in which building control it probably does touch on, but in any event, the applicant themselves has a duty under the fire safety regulations order in order to have done these kind of checks, to ensure that the premises is safe and in a good standard. The fire safety report that's been submitted as a result of this from their independent officer is, well, if you've read it, you'll see that it carries a list at the back of things that are not good and need looking at, basically. So it's got it's risk rated on 1 to 4, and there are quite a few ones on there, 1 being the worst. Lots of 1s and lots of 2s in the list of things that need immediate attention. I think even if building control were to have been involved or coming back to say anything to the to Miss Sullivan, it would have been the fact that her own fire officer's report was not very positive, to be honest with you. I mean, it talks about some plastic coverings and things like that within the premises, which wouldn't be compliant in their view with fire safety measures, and speak to the public safety objective, really. So it's highlighting many things that the applicant needs to address in the meantime, or will need to address really before having the public in or saying that they're going to be offering license for activities. And as Mr. Brown says, there are conditions, and it's not the first time. There are conditions that can be added if members are minded to grant the application. A condition can be added to ensure that those matters, these outstanding public safety matters, are addressed and signed off satisfactorily before the license is put to use on site.
And Chair, maybe this is an appropriate time. It's Michelle Williams, the legal advisor, to address the question that was raised about the absence of building control. So just looking at the Licensing Act 2003 hearing regulations 2005, under Regulation 15, a party may attend a licensing hearing, but they're not obliged to. And under Regulation 18, the committee can take into account their written representations. And the committee may adjourn a hearing if it's necessary in the public interest, or they may proceed in the absence of a party. So it's within your discretion to hold the hearing and to consider the written representations and to give them appropriate weight and to deal with them as you see appropriate. And as Ms. Barrett has said, you can, if necessary, impose conditions to ensure that the public safety licensing objective is upheld.
I think the chair may have frozen.
I think she might have frozen too.
Perhaps we should adjourn briefly, Philip.
Yep, seems sensible. If we adjourn briefly for, I don't know, a minute or so. I'll keep you updated when the chair returns. Oh no, she's back. I think she's just on mute. Sorry, bear with me.
You're on mute, Chairperson.
Sorry, Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. It was the connection with Haringa. I think I ran out of time. Okay, I'm back. Yes, I heard what Mrs. Barrett said. It was, I think you were right at the end there, talking about building control. Okay, let me.
Sorry, Chair, if you were frozen at the time, I think it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile the legal officer then repeating what information she just provided.
Okay, Michelle. Okay, I can't see.
Yes, Chair. Sorry, I gave advice, Chair, about the absence of building control. And what I advised is that under the Licensing Act 2003 hearing regulations 2005, a party may attend a hearing, but they're not obliged to attend the hearing. And under Regulation 18, the committee can take into account written representations. And under Regulation 20, when a party does not attend, the committee may adjourn if it's necessary in the public interests, or may hold the hearing in their absence. So it's entirely within the committee's discretion, and you can take into account the written representations and deal with them appropriately. And as you heard, Ms. Barrett advised that in terms of the public safety licensing objective, if the committee was not to be satisfied that that objective had been complied with at this stage, there are conditions that could be imposed if the committee was minded to grant the application.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll take the questions from members. I think first, yes, it was Councillor Sarah Williams, and first, I think, if I'm not wrong, and Councillor Harrison. Ask your questions, please.
So I just have one question, and that is, we of course realised that when a lot of the problems were happening in the past, it was with a club called Pinnacle, and the applicant tonight wasn't a licensee at that time. So my question is, when they've had these unlicensed events over the last however long it is, who was the licensee at that time? What's the relationship between today's applicant and the holder of the unlicensed events in the recent past?
My instruction on that particular issue, when it's been said there's been unlicensed events, is that it was there was a colleague of Miss Sullivan. It wasn't her running those events. That's my instructions. I've asked that question. That's what I've been told, that there's been someone else that was being responsible for that. That's all I can say. I mean, Miss Sullivan's on the meeting. If she wants to contribute to that, she's feel free to do so.
That's indicative of how it's going on then. That is indicative of how this is going.
Sorry, who is that? Who is that? I'm taking questions from councillors at the moment. I don't know who was that. Okay. Do you have any more questions, Councillor Williams?
Sorry, Chair, will you give Ms. Sullivan the opportunity to respond to that question?
I can't see her, and she's not indicating that she wants to speak. Yes, if she does want to say something, yes. But I can't see her. Okay.
I just wanted to point out there was no illegal events. There was no selling of alcohol, and also it was all before. Nothing was carried out after 11 o'clock.
Okay, Councillor Williams, do you have any additional questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. And then Councillor Harrison, please.
Thank you, Chair. The answer's thrown me a little bit, actually. I mean, a lot of our role as licensing subcommittee is making a decision based on the evidence in front of us, and a lot of that is putting trust into proprietors of new venues quite often. You know, some element of reputation of old venues plays a part, and links and that sort of thing. But you've been operating this venue for 2 years now, albeit without a license so far, but there's been a number of TENS events. And we have a situation where it feels a little bit like the buck is being passed to building control for the issues with the building not being sorted out, but there's been 2 years to resolve that. So I'm wondering why, when you took over the premises, why as a responsible owner did you not look at some of the safety concerns that are now evident through your own independent report and through the building control reports? Also, the venue has quite a history, that's evident, and Mr. Brown, you commented on that a few times, and that's not necessarily a reflection on you as the new owners or anything like that, but there was always going to be a lot of interest when an application for a license were to come through. So I'm wondering, how many residents have you actually spoken to about your application? How many public forums have you held? How many engagement events? How many of the conditions have you talked through with residents? How many concerns have you heard and looked to resolve in the past 2 years? And how many of your conditions are based on those engagements? The answer just then, in response to Councillor Williams' question, was two-part. One, it was nothing to do with us. That was someone else that was running the unlicensed events. And then the second part was we didn't run any unlicensed events, and the events didn't go on past 11 anyway. But
Sorry,
we have
can I just
evidence.
say, what I was saying is there was no unlicensed events.
Sure, okay, but we have evidence in the pack of ticket sales for events being advertised for up to 1 a.m. and the event's still online as being advertised for up until 1 a.m. There's still social media of the event. So I'm wondering what that event was and what the tickets were sold for that was going on till 1 a.m.
So we actually spoke to the people when we found out that, and we didn't
So who are the people?
The people are the ones who booked the event. So, and we didn't allow them to go through with that.
Right, but we have photos of the event.
Sorry, what was that?
We have photos in the pack from the event.
Yeah, but they didn't go up until 1 o'clock. That's what I'm saying. It wasn't what they wanted to do is go up until 1 o'clock, as it says on the leaflet, but we didn't allow that to go on till 1 o'clock.
Okay, all right. And then we have representations of from noise officers through in the pack where there's complaints about noise. One of them is at 3 a.m. for example. Drunken people seen leaving the venue. So if the venue wasn't open until 3 a.m., how's that possible? Is that members of staff? Is that something else? So there's a number of consistencies that are worrying me, that you are responsible proprietors here, that I want addressing, really.
Yes, I am responsible.
Okay. Further to that, the request includes license hours on a Sunday when you don't have planning permission to do so. So why include that? Was that an oversight? Were you not aware of the planning condition there, or are you perhaps looking at putting in a planning request? In terms of the new business model, which is to hire out the venue for private events, bar mitzvahs, birthday parties, and that sort of thing. I don't think I've ever been to a birthday party with 2 SIA officers on the door. So I'm just wondering how that business model really tallies, because that's quite a big expense for someone hiring a venue to pay for 2 staff members on the door. So I just would like you to elaborate slightly on that business model, given that you put that forward as a condition within the supplementary pack list Mr. Brown put forward in the last, I think it was a week or so ago.
Yeah, so what would happen is they will have to pay for security, and we are going ahead with security for the sake of our residents.
Can I come
Okay, perhaps you can come back to me on some of the engagement even.
Councillor Harrison, 1 minute. Can I just clarify something? When you say the people who they will have to pay for it, will that be including the charges you charge them for the night, or would they be up to them to arrange it and pay separate?
That will be included in the charges for when they hire out the venue.
Okay. Sorry, look, I'm interrupting you. Carry on. I didn't want to lose that.
That's okay. That's no problem. Hopefully, Mr. Brown, perhaps you can come back on some of the earlier kind of queries that I raised, and just let me know if you want me to repeat anything.
Well, Ms. Solomon will address some of them. I've got a note you referred to engagement. She'll be able to speak to what specifically she has done, or how, if she's spoken to residents or not. I do know Ms. Solomon has worked in that area, used to work in a bank in the area. She's familiar with the area. I do want to say this as a general anecdotal reflection. Short answer is I don't have instructions on what engagement was done or not with residents. What I do know from these applications is that engaging with residents can be a difficult thing, and it's not no criticism on any one side, because relations, emotions can be strained, can be difficult, and people simply just don't want to necessarily have a dialogue or a conversation because they may be fearful, they may be suspicious, and so forth. What I do know is that Ms. Solomon is open to a dialogue with residents. It's one of the conditions that's been put into this supplementary pack to specifically have at least once a month at the invitation of residents. Come and speak to us. Come and speak to me. If there's any concerns, I'm happy to engage with that. So if there has even been an absence of that dialogue, one, that I know that has not been intentional, but two, built within these proposals is a proposal that there's such a dialogue that is mandated and as part of the arrangements. But Ms. Solomon can perhaps speak to what she has or hasn't, what residents she's spoken to or not spoken to up to now.
Yes, so when we have tried it out as a dessert restaurant, we've actually had a lot of the residents around Muswell Hill who have come in, and they've been blown away by, you know, how amazing it is inside there. So I have actually had that one-to-one conversation with them, and you know, they've loved it.
And to go back to an initial point, some of the issues with building control, why weren't they looked at in the last 2 years?
Well, they have been looked at, and it wasn't because of you know, because of COVID and everything. It hasn't really been necessary to go, you know, it now's what is necessary, because now is COVID, the restrictions are lifted now, and we just want to move forward for the sake of our residents as well. We just want to do what's right for them, really, so they can have something where they can do their events and be safe around as well. So yeah.
Okay, and on the request for a Sunday license?
If I can address that particular point, that may well be something that, arguably, something that the solicitor should have addressed. The short answer is when we put in application premises licenses, it goes out to various responsible authorities, including planning. There was, as I'm aware, there's been no objections raised from planning. I wasn't aware, to be frank, that he didn't have planning permission for Sundays, and we didn't have any contributions on that. But that is an application can certainly and will certainly be made to cover that. Once again, that is of course a matter that could form part of a condition if you're minded to grant such a license, of course. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Can I clarify something? You said your answer to Councillor Harrison that because of the virus, you didn't think it was necessary to put to follow building controls advice and put things right. But I would say to you that it should have been the opposite, because you were closed. It was an opportunity to work with building control and make the buildings safer for fires risk and do whatever was necessary and work with building control. So because if it was me, I would use that time to make the changes that I needed to change. So I'm ready to open once the virus is over. And I can't help feeling that there is a reluctance. I may be wrong, of course. You seem to be a little reluctant to work with building control. I don't know why. Maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But that's how it comes across.
Could I respond to that on behalf of the
Yes, please.
applicant? Well, two things. Firstly, my experience of COVID, as no doubt others in this meeting will testify, is that businesses across this country have reacted to COVID in all kinds of different ways. And I think one of the common reactions has been for businesses simply to withdraw and not make risky decisions, not make decisions, especially where there's a financial expense, until the pandemic had passed. That's not necessarily right or wrong, but I can fully understand why a business owner would not take some of the steps that you and I would say they should have taken. For example, having a risk assessment, for example, addressing the points which have been raised now by building control, as it were. So I can fully understand why, for business reasons, an applicant might not have done so. But that should not, in my view, lead to a negative assessment of this applicant, because they are willing to do so. And second point I'll say here, in terms of the report they have put forward, it is equally as critical of them as it is simply saying what can be done. So in other words, they haven't shied away from putting before this committee a report which also has flags areas what they need to address. What they're actually saying is, this is what we have identified, these are the challenges. Work with us, make it a condition of your audition if you wish, and we'll set it right, we'll put it in order. And the final point about working with building control, we are very much interested in working with building control. I just remind you, the committee here, I myself specifically sent this report to building control as quickly as I was able to do so, and we specifically invited building control to say, are there any issues that you are still unhappy with? Have we got it right? Have we got it wrong? They haven't come back at all. So if building control want to work with us, very much happy to do that. That's our preference. That's position A. We simply haven't heard from them. They're not even here tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I just, the reason I asked was more down to the fact that the venue opened in July 2019. That, you know, that's nearly 9 months before COVID. They didn't not do the work because of COVID. As you say, Chair, there was an opportunity during COVID to carry out some works, but they were operating as a venue with patrons inside for 9 months before COVID anyway. Just for clarity, the venue didn't open during the times of COVID.
Okay. Do you want to respond to that, or shall I move to the other people?
No. Yeah, can I respond to that, please?
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, yeah. In fact, in 2019, we was actually operating as a dessert venue. Dessert restaurant, sorry.
But it would still require fire safety of any patrons, though.
Yes. Okay. I have a lot of hands up. I will allow people to ask their questions, but can I please ask there be brief questions and brief answers, please? So I will start from the top on my list. Is Mr. Singh?
Hi there. Thank you, Chairperson. I've got a couple of questions, so I'll try and be brief and quick with them all. In the applicant's submission of the 16th of September, they make reference in paragraph 11 to the fact that the new business model will not attract the type of clientele and the associated behaviour which led to the problems associated with the socialite bar. I'm assuming that the way that is going to happen, but correct me if I'm wrong, is through this detailed risk assessment that Ms. Sullivan is said to be undertaking at paragraph 16 of that same submission. Now, that detailed risk assessment will only be on the person booking the venue and the party for private hire. And so out of either 70, 100 or 130 people who are in attendance, you will be doing a detailed risk assessment on one person. So I just want to understand how that is proportionate and how that will ensure that that type of clientele will not be attending this bar, this venue, when you're only doing a detailed risk assessment on one person. The second point I'll say is that in terms of you've talked, I think it was Mr. Brown who made reference to the fact that parties for 18 to 21-year-olds in terms of the risk group is such that is why the condition will be that anyone under 18 or over 30 will be permitted to book a venue here for a private party. So is that saying that no one between the ages of 18 and 21 will be permitted access to this venue because that is the risk group that has been highlighted? And will that be made a condition of the application here? So those are the two questions I want to say. And obviously, you've highlighted that anyone under 18, between 18 and 21 can't make an application. But ultimately, just as I can, if I was underage, I can get somebody to go to an off license who's older and buy some alcohol for me, then what's to prevent an 18-year-old getting a 30-year-old to book the party and then just have an 18-year-old birthday party at the venue anyway?
Okay. Do you want to respond, Mr. Brown?
Yes, I'll respond to that. Is that firstly, with the 18 and 21 point, as I understand the condition, it's not that they are saying they would bar 18 and 21-year-olds. It's saying that they would not hold birthdays, which are 18th birthday or the 21st birthday. So of course, you may well have an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old in a particular event, but the event will not be an 18th birthday or a 21st birthday. That's the point there. And the other point about risk assessment, you're right to say with everything, this is a balance. So an individual comes in, they say, I want to hold a party. Ms. Sullivan does a risk assessment with them. That risk assessment will include not only an assessment of them, who are the type of people you're going to invite to this particular event, what type of people are going to be, what the numbers are. Bear in mind there's a capacity, according to this report, of up to only 100 total anyway, 70 members of the public according to the report itself. So it's not, I think you mentioned higher numbers. So there's a limitance to numbers anyway. My point is this, a risk assessment, we rely on the risk assessment to enable Ms. Sullivan to gauge whether or not this is an event that we should entertain or not, we should have or not. I would also say this, with every single condition I've ever seen before any licensing committee, there's always room for it to be exploited, to be undermined in some way. We have put forward what we believe are to be our conditions, which would enable this applicant to do the best that they can within the operating model that they have to guarantee only the right type of people come to the event. There is no council of perfection here. It's the best that we can do. But this is a discussion. And so, of course, if you or anyone else has any further suggestions on that, then, of course, that's the whole purpose of a licensing committee hearing, is to come forward with those suggestions, which obviously, other than simply say, I don't want this application to go forward at all. Ms. Sullivan is very much open to any further comments or contributions in relation to that. But that is, I hope that answers your question. So the risk assessment, yes, based on person booking, and to the degree that she can make an assessment as who's going to be following after these people, we rely on the risk assessment to answer that question. And on your second point about 18 and 21, it's what's banned is what's not going to happen are 18th birthday party or the 21st birthday party. Now, I agree with you. In your worst case scenario, somebody who is, let's say who's 25 or as it were comes on, I want to book an event for myself, and they're lying and someone else comes forward. Obviously, the license holder then has a choice to make. If they suddenly realize they've been duped or there's been misleading, they can then take action. They'll be required. Otherwise, they'll be in a breach. They'll be in breach of their own license if they were to do so in the scenario you just given there.
Thank you. I just noticed that our legal advisor put her hand up. Michelle, I will call her, see if there's anything she needs to advise us. Michelle, you want to?
Sorry, Chair. I should have lowered my hand from before. I'll lower it now. My apologies.
I see. Okay. No, that's fine. Can I ask? It's a lot of people who want to speak, and we don't have a lot of time. But I do want to hear you. But I need to say, please make the questions short, and the response, please don't keep repeating either the same questions or the responses. So I will call Barbara Hall, but can you please hold, make it brief? Ah, are you here?
They're just trying to unmute.
Okay.
All right. I want to make the point that there is a website already operating which advertises the venue as being opened until 2 a.m. That it will actually accommodate 130 people, and I think that you know, we need to be clear that you know, this is, you know, already not. You know, we're already being told that this is not the case. You know, that they're only up to 70 people, and that the party's not going to be held until 2 a.m. in the morning. So why are they already advertising those times? You know, it's absolutely outrageous. And you know, and please would Mr. Brown keep his answers brief if he's going to talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you hold on to that and you come back? I can take another question. You can answer both questions. And then it's Maria Karayaskos, I think. Maria, are you here?
Hello, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yes.
2 points that I wish to raise, please, in response to the submissions that Mr. Brown has made on behalf of the applicant.
Could you answer the question? If you have a question, please
The first question, is the panel not duty bound to consider the history and precedent and past behaviour of the previously named venue in considering this application? Because he seems to suggest that you shouldn't consider that. Are you not duty bound to consider it? That's my first point. And my second question, he refers to the police withdrawing their representations, but he is speculating as to why that has occurred. It's right, isn't it, that there's no evidence of the police positively supporting the application in this case?
Okay, thank you. Can you briefly respond to, especially to the police one? And as for the panel, we can make our own decision. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, as legal advisor, I'll respond to the question about the panel.
Okay, please do.
Yes, so the committee has to consider what are relevant representations, and they have to consider the history of the property and the likely impact of granting the license. So they can, to a limited extent, consider what's happened historically with someone else, but primarily they have to concern themselves with what's likely to happen if they grant the license to this applicant.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, do you want to respond on the police question?
Yes, I'll deal with that last one. So my point there is that I do draw a significance from the police's withdrawal of representations. Bear in mind, the police, their role under the licensing regime is specifically around the prevention of crime and disorder. That's their brief. That's what they bring to the table. So if they themselves are happy to as it were, withdraw the representations, that it is, as a solicitor who's here, my job is to represent my client. I'm entitled to make the argument that the authority that's responsible for crime and disorder is satisfied, in my submission, that there is no ongoing risk of crime and disorder. Otherwise, they'd be here today. They're not here. They've walked away from this. So I think that's a reasonable submission. The panel may agree, may not agree.
That, please? Might be permitted to very briefly respond to that point,
No, I don't. Only if you have another question. You need to answer the Barbara's questions as well.
Chair, I can assist. The police have actually said that if these conditions are accepted in full, I would withdraw my representation. My understanding is that the applicant has accepted those conditions in full, and therefore the representations have been withdrawn by the police.
Yes, we understand that. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Can I just quickly deal with the other questions that were raised?
Yes, please.
One was around 130 people versus and also the 2 a.m. Or the comments on the website. Basically, the website predates the report. The report, fire risk assessment, which talks about capacity of 100, is dated 23rd of August 2021. So in other words, so the venue was operating with its understanding, a layperson's understanding of what the capacity was, 130 people. It's since had this independent report which says now the capacity is more like 100 people, 70 public, 30 with staff and public, 130 people. So it's abiding by that. So there's no contradiction. It's simply got new information and it's acting and abiding with the professional, with that professional time.
Okay.
And in terms of times, obviously, there's a difference in the law between the time you can open as a business versus the licensing activity for which we need the license, for which we are here today. So they're not breaking any rules by saying they open to 2 a.m. As far as I can see, I haven't heard it suggested that they're in breach of their planning rules. But today is all about trying to say, can they do regulated entertainment within the times that we set out? So I hope that answers that question.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Right at the very beginning, Mr. Brown said that if the panel was to refuse this licence, that would mean that that particular premises can't ever be licensed. But I don't think that's what we're saying. What we're saying is that the 2 a.m. close is the problem here. So can I ask, would the applicants accept, for example, an 11 p.m. Close every night of the week, because they're talking about children's parties, christenings, that sort of thing, corporate events? Why do you need to go on till 2 a.m.? My second question is about the police response. Mr. Brown said the licensing officer walked away because he accepts the conditions. The licensing officer may have walked away, but the police panel, both Muswell Hill Police Panel and Fortis Green Police Panel, and the border between the two wards runs down the middle of the road. So Wetherspoons is in Muswell Hill ward, and this premises is in Fortis Green ward, and both wards work very closely together, and police officers in both wards, and these are the police officers on the ground, don't share Mr. Brown's view that this won't be a problem. Third question is, you said that people will be moved away from the front of the premises after it closes, but that's one of the problems, is they all go around the corner, they go around the side of 77 Muswell Hill, they go round into Wellfield Avenue, they go down into Springfield Avenue. So the problem doesn't stop actually on Muswell Hill itself. If they're moved on, they just go 100 yards, 200 yards further away. So would you accept that the moving on, if, for example, there were SIA registered doormen, they could move it on, but it doesn't solve the problem. And my fourth question is, I don't understand why building regulations haven't been adhered to, because I can name 4 pubs in the local area that have been fully refurbished in the last year or 18 months over COVID. The Phoenix Bar, which is just about to open at Ali Pali, fully refurbished. The Clissold Arms has been refurbished in Fortis Green. The Bald Faced Stag in East Finchley has been fully refurbished in the last year or so. The John Baird, now renamed the Village Green, has been fully refurbished in the last year or 18 months. So I don't accept that nothing could have been done while the premises was closed during COVID. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can the answers be brief, please, so we have time to take the rest of the questions?
Yeah, I think it's Miss Solomon, because I have no instructions, who needs to answer this point, whether or not she's willing to reduce the hours to 11 a.m. Is that being suggested? Is that for 7 days a week, or what's the specific question?
Yes. I'm saying, would the applicant accept a reduction of hours 7 days a week?
To 11 o'clock?
close.
Can the applicant respond, please?
Yeah, sure. So we just finished getting work done in the venue, so that's why we haven't had any assessments done. And for the question about the reducing hours, so if someone wanted a 30th birthday party or 40th birthday party or 50th, they more likely would want to go on to longer than 11 o'clock.
So your response is no. You're not happy with the reducing the hours. Am I correct? Is that what you say?
No. Yeah, your answer is correct. It's a no, because it's not fair for those who do want to, like I said, the ones that do want to have a 30th, 40th, or 50th.
Okay.
It's not fair for them if they want to go on for a little bit longer.
Okay. The rest of the questions, who is going to respond to them?
I must say I heard them more as comments rather than.
Yeah, and I thought you responded about the police a number of times. So we move on, I think. And then I have Laura, Ben. Let's take to oh my goodness. It's a lot of people here. Can you, if there are new questions, something that hasn't been covered?
Sorry, Chairperson, Councillor Ross put a question about dispersal, which was relevant to moving people from outside the premises to down the street and what the applicant will be doing about that. So I think that's actually a relevant question that hasn't been answered before.
I don't know, Mr. Brown, can you answer that?
Yes, so we
Okay.
come to the, in my view, okay, as quickly as I can, we come to the limit or the challenge of the licensing regime. All any operator can do is act according to the license objectives within the remit of their premises. They are not responsible. They cannot follow patrons down the road to find out where they're going or escort them home. They've got to make sure that they are managing those patrons within their premises lawfully, and also that they are dispersed from the premises. Now, to the point about them being where they go to other people, the short answer is that there's very little that any operator can do. If someone leaves the Broadway or leaves Mossy Wells, does the SIA from Mossy Wells follow the patrons down the road to make sure they're going home, as it were? So what I'm saying is the most that we can ask venue intend to do is to operate dispersal policy in which people are lawfully and calmly dispersed from the premises. The fact that they go elsewhere, that is sadly, that's a feature of every most licensed premises in the country. So I must say, I think there's only so much any operator can do.
Okay.
I think the difference here is though that the Mossy Well serves the local clientele.
Can I stop you there, please? That's okay. We'll move on. Okay, Laura,
thank you, Gina.
Could you please, if you have questions that you feel hasn't been answered, make it brief.
I wanted to make a statement about Ms. Suleiman. She's saying that, I mean, first of all, there has been no community engagement whatsoever. And Ms. Suleiman says there have been no unlicensed events. However, there are advertised events, and we know they have taken place, and there's evidence for that. And her colleague agreed an unlicensed event, but I thought she was the responsible person. So I just want to say that I have no confidence whatsoever in Ms. Suleiman as a license holder.
Thank you. I don't think there was a direct question there. Correct me if I'm wrong. Ben, is Ben Rogoff? Yeah, do you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, Madam Chair, thank you. Look, I think it's a shame that we're all having to hear this speculative application, using up an evening of our lives. I mean, capacity numbers plucked out of thin air, no reference to the fact that unlicensed events have been held, no reference to the fact that other premises with late licenses haven't had theirs revoked for stabbings and shootings. The Mossy Well retained its license before residential development has taken place. And that's the elephant in this room, which we haven't talked about properly tonight, which is that there has been significant residential development in the area since the license was revoked, and it hasn't been referenced properly. My question to Mr. Brown is, does he accept that the economic value uplift associated with the re-provisioning of a licence will accrue to Mr. John, the same owner of the socialite bar that terrorised our neighbourhood? And does he accept that residents might be sceptical about the fit and properness of the applicant to properly vet and disperse inebriated guests when they're not even able to prevent their guests from, making them wear masks or adhere to social distancing laws during a global pandemic? And I reference a photograph that I submitted from the 5th of December 2020 as evidence. So 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you respond, Mr. Brown?
Chair,
the first one.
Sorry, Chair. I think in
sure,
terms of, yes, in terms of the first question, I don't think Mr. Brown should answer that. That's not a relevant consideration as to whether or not Mr. John will financially benefit from this licence. It's not a relevant consideration for the committee, I'm afraid.
Well, I'm aware of that, but I want to allow a response. I don't want to be accused of not allowing a response. Okay.
Could I just hear the second question in a concise fashion?
Yes.
I think it was
Yeah.
quite a long question.
The inability to ask photographic evidence I submitted from the 5th of December 2020 with about 20 guests hanging around outside the premise, none of which were wearing masks, none of which were being social distancing was being adhered. And you're asking this committee and residents to believe that this applicant is capable or willing to control, vet and disperse its guests, particularly after heavy drinking that ends and culminates at 2 a.m. So thank you.
Yeah, all I can say there is Miss Sullivan's here. She's spoken for herself, and I can only advance on her behalf that she's the one. She's held a personal license now for a number of years. She's operated, I believe, 8 temporary event notices. As far as my submission that she does, there's enough here for this licensing subcommittee to place confidence in her. I must say, to be honest, the people that get premises licenses every single day in this country, you wouldn't necessarily, a lot of them may, they're ordinary people just like you and I, and they may or may not have the skills that in your assessment. But if the law allows, if somebody has got a personal license, there's no fundamental objection against them. There's no question about their suitability. In my submission, Ms. Sullivan is able and will deliver according to the premises license. She's aware of her legal obligations, and she would do so.
Okay, thank you. I gonna call. Sorry, who is that?
I just want to ask a quick question because I think it's relevant. I'm a resident.
Your name, please.
My name's Sinead.
Right, you haven't indicated you wanted to speak, but make it brief, please.
Okay. I wanted to ask, what is the relationship of Mrs. Solomon to the leaseholder? I'm just wondering if they're in a personal relationship, and I think it's important because I'm wondering if actually he's just put her forward as a licensee because he's unable.
Right. Okay.
To manage the club. I think it is pertinent to know that.
I understand. I don't know whatever any. I don't know who's going to respond to this. The applicant herself.
Yeah, I'll respond to that. I'll respond to that. There is actually no personal relationship going on with me and the leasee, Mr. John. This is just my own business.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just a further follow-up question. I'm just very curious, given the kind of history of the socialite bar, and you say there's no personal relationship, why you would want to take on such a venue with such difficult history. And the second thing, just to follow up on the fire issues with the residents, if you're going to, with the premises, if you're going to hold birthday parties there with lots of candles and fire, I would have thought that this would put small children at risk, given the condition of the building at the moment.
Yeah, so there won't be no birthday candles there. So therefore that's easy to say that that will be safe. And just repeat the first question, the second question you asked me, sorry.
I'm just wondering, given the history of that venue,
yeah,
why you would want to take that on and become a licensee without any kind of personal relationship with this Mr. John, because surely you could have found a venue with a in a better location.
Because I've worked in Muswell Hill. I used to work in a bank there, so I know the area quite well, and doing events is what I want to do.
Okay, thank you. I think I will ask one, Mr. Singh, I think you spoke a number of times, do forgive me.
You've got Mr. Com Quinn, who's had his hand up quite some time.
I don't seem to see here the name there, other hand. Okay.
Mr. Quinn?
He's not here on my list. I can't see either his name or his hand, but yeah, if he wants to speak, yes.
Can I take that question instead if he's not here?
Oh, hang on a minute. Do you know what question he has?
Well, no, because I think it was Sinead who asked when Carl Quinn put his hand up. I think she spoke on his behalf.
Oh, right, okay.
I mean, you're talking about the issues here in terms of the dispersal and the like, but we've had Mr. Brown made reference to the fact that there hasn't been the basis of the application or the representations made by residents have related to the socialite bar, but there have been instances here where people have complained and raised representations in relation to this applicant holding the venue and events right now. So there is a differentiation between the Mozzie Well and what's happened since the socialite bar was shut, and actually what's happened since this venue has been open under the current applicant. So Mr. Brown's point around there needing to be a differentiation, we've experienced the socialite bar, we've experienced without it, and we have experienced this applicant operating the venue as well.
Before you answer, there is one more question, I think, from Magdalena. So if I ask you to ask a question, then you can respond to both.
Thank you, Chair.
That would be the last question. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Brown, you were referring to a venue that is just you can't the applicant can't control what is happening around the corner. I think that as a resident, we've been witnessing the Mozzie Well actually security who was trying to spread the leaving guests immediately. So even if they were gathering or, around the corner, they've been trying to point them on the bus stops or taxis. When Ms. Saliman was mentioning that it's just that you're not willing to actually just decrease hours of operation, like there is a massive difference when the crowd leaving at 11 p.m. and the crowd leaving at 2 a.m. It's a residential area, and as a couple of ladies mentioned earlier on, we all witnessed in the past 2 years when the venue N10 was in operation that people, they were gathering outside of the venue N10 with the cigarettes, with the drinks in hand. Well, there is no actually outdoor space at the venue N10 because the entry is right from the pavement. So it's also a massive risk for the public safety, because when the crowd actually is just gathering, there is no way of passing them by without actually stepping on the road. And basically entry to the venue N10 is between the access to a residential area and other businesses. So when you're going to have a big crowd of 130 people, let's say at the max capacity, whatever it is, until we go and just decide, well, whatever it's going to be agreed was the maximum capacity, how are you going to regulate actually the queue to the venue? And how you going to control what Mr. Brown was saying, that you want to have a specific and relevant crowd at the venue itself? So how are you going to screen the people who actually entering the premises?
Okay,
Because,
thank you. Okay,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Could you please respond to both those questions, if you can?
Yes, I think I can deal with the first of those. I think Ms. Sullivan may have to address these points about the screening arrangements.
Okay.
As far as the moving people on, I note the point there about SIA from Mozzie Wells and perhaps others who take a proactive role to actually move crowds on, ensure or help them get into taxis and buses? My short answer to that is it is within the gift of this licensing committee to put such conditions on any licensing, if it grants, that could go along the lines of, for example, requiring the applicant's SIA security to not only disperse, but the dispersal policy could be so worded that those specific steps that you talk about are covered. I appreciate I will still say there's a limit to how much any operator can do, because ultimately people have human rights. We can't force or frog march people into a taxi or onto a bus. Nevertheless, the wording of that dispersal policy which is what I think you're getting at there, could certainly be something that could be thrashed out between the applicant and the council, so that an effective dispersal policy takes place. You're a resident living in a situation in which, from what you tell me, your life is or has been made hell by people who leave one venue and they mill around and they carry on in the public, in the street and so forth. And you seem to suggest the Mossy Wells are quite good at moving people on and get them out of the area. Well, there's no reason why this applicant can't similarly replicate that. I would look to the wording of the dispersal policy to do so. But if I can ask Ms. Sullivan to address the points around the screening arrangements that they'd have there, because of course I simply don't know, because I haven't asked her that question.
Yeah, sure, that's absolutely fine. So coming down to the screening, we will screen the people who want to have the event, and only allow those who are on their list to come in. If they're not on the list, they're not coming in. We'll tell people to not advertise anything on social media. If it is advertised, then we won't go ahead with the event. And basically, lastly, it's just we will do exactly what Muzzywell does and the Broadway does, in terms of escorting people away. So we'll just do exactly what they do.
Thank you.
Chair, can I have a follow-up on that, please?
Short one about screening. Listen, there are more hands up. I can't take any more questions. I think we have to move on. If it's for something new, because
you know what? Can I ask you just a new question, Chair?
Sorry. If it's a new question,
could I just ask a quick new question? Would the applicant accept the idea of no entry to guests after a certain time? If the venue is going to be used for birthday parties and for bar mitzvahs, I mean, is there a case that that people shouldn't be able to enter the premise, let's say, after 10 o'clock, or give residents comfort that people leaving the Wetherspoon pub won't be entering the venue at 1 a.m. So would the applicant consider revising their application to not allow entry to the venue beyond a certain time? Thank you.
A quick response, please.
I think that one has already been accepted. I think that's already been accepted. It was highlighted in our submissions that was one of the problems with the socialite bar. Members could come in after 12:30. So we specifically said that. And that, again, is a condition that we'd invite the licensing subcommittee to include in its decision.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question as well? Are these people coming to the club going to be COVID tested? Do they have a COVID passport going into the club?
Hang on a minute, please. I think we had a good discussion, and they'll be able to sum up as well. So I will ask each people. I will ask in turn the officers, the applicants, and the councillors all to sum it up. So if it's something that is been left out, I'm sure they will cover it. So can I please ask the licensing officer first to Delia, you want to sum up?
Sorry, Chair. Can I just respond to Ms. Hall's or the question that just came from, I think Ms. Hall and Ms. Conway. So there is no requirement for COVID passports in the UK at this time. So we cannot impose anything that is basically not within the gift of the licensing committee to do so.
Thank you. Could you sum up, please, as well?
Michelle will sum up, Chair, as the licensing.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say from the Licensing Authority that we'd invite the Licensing Subcommittee to consider all matters raised this evening from residents and our Licensing Authority rep, and it's for you to decide whether to grant or not this licence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Councillor Ross to sum up on behalf of residents?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I think we've had an extremely robust discussion about the problems in the past and what residents fear may happen in the future. And I think, to sum up, I just think the expression "it's an extremely different business model" just doesn't allay the residents' fears of what may happen in the future if an extremely late licence goes ahead. And I'm disappointed, and I'm sure residents are disappointed, that there was an emphatic no from the applicant when it was suggested that she might reduce the hours. Thank you for that, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I just say, sorry, can I just say...
I was going to ask either Mr. Brown or yourself to sum up, please.
Just quickly on that one, we only said no to closing earlier. That's only for the weekends. So every other day would be if there was an event, because there won't be events. There won't be events every day. It's only as and when someone's booked an event. So that obviously we've lowered the time. But we're just asking for the weekends just to stay up until 2 o'clock for those who want a 30th, 40th or 50th party.
Okay. Are you going to sum up, or is Mr. Brown going to sum up?
Mr. Brown will actually.
Okay.
Yes. So very briefly, application has already been set out. This is a challenging application because of the history and the strength of feeling in this community that I acknowledge. I hear it, I feel it, and I see it. Here's what I want to suggest or submit here. The role of this licensing subcommittee is to make a decision that is proportionate. One of the words that Councillor Ross just used was about residents' fears. You cannot make a decision based on fears. It's got to be based on a proportionate decision. What is required to promote the licensing objectives here? And I submit that you've got enough here within the application and also within your gift of powers as a licensing subcommittee to grant a license with such conditions that will give you and residents the peace of mind that you've made a decision that is proportionate, that it's a lawful decision. All the concerns, all the fears that residents have articulated, Councillor Ross has eloquently addressed, can be addressed by a raft of suitable conditions. I haven't heard anything tonight which suggests that Miss Sullivan herself is not a person of integrity and is not a person that will not do what the law requires her to do. She'll uphold the licensing objectives. She'll carry out her legal duties. No one has suggested anything else. So therefore, all things being equal, you have someone who's a genuine applicant before you. You've got a very detailed set of conditions here. And in any other application in the country that I've ever been dealt with, this is the type of application that would be granted, albeit with conditions. And the other point I'll say there on this issue about reducing of hours on the weekends, my instructions are obviously what Ms. Sullivan has said, but this committee will know there's no yes or no here. Everything is in the mix. Everything is in the balance. The licensing subcommittee has the power to make such decisions as it sees fit. And you have in my submission a raft of conditions that will allow you to do that lawfully and effectively.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brown. I'd like to thank every one of you who came here tonight. Officers and the applicants and the residents, all of you, thank you. Now I will ask you to leave us, and the committee are
Sorry.
Sorry.
Can I just say one more? What can I just make something certain?
No. We finished. No, you can't. We had all the sum up.
It will literally take 2 seconds. I just wanted to assure all the residents that this will not become a nightclub. I'm going to run a really tight ship. Like, it will not. I just want the safety of my residents. No nightclub at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for.
You can't even obey to the chair. You can't even obey to the chair. The chair's just said no. You talked all over her. What else do you have of being a responsible licensee?
I'm just trying to put your mind at rest because I care for the residents.
Could you please stop? As I said before, thank you to everyone who come. I do appreciate it. You're spending your time here and all the representations and the reports. Thank you very much. I will ask you now to leave us. We're going to have a discussion to the committee, and with the officers will write to you within 5 working days our decision. Thank you again very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.